How's it going, everybody? This is Cameron White with White Light Astrology, and welcome back to your favorite weekly horoscope. What the fuck is going on in the universe for April 29th through May 6th of 2019. Thank you guys so much for being here and liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you. This week is going to be quite a bit of change because this week's highlights, we've got Saturn stationing retrograde this week. We have Mercury squaring Saturn, Mercury right in between the nodes. It's going to be squaring both the South Node and the North Node. Then we're going to have later on Mercury trining Jupiter and squaring Pluto. And then later on we're going to have the new moon in Taurus, and then by the time we get to next week's video, we're going to have Mercury enter Taurus as well. And so, besides Mercury's ingress, everything is mostly just aspects this week, and we have that lunation, which is going to be in Taurus, which is going to be a little bit nice, but I really think the main theme here is, Mercury in Aries, Venus in Aries, and Saturn stationing retrograde, while the South Node is on top of Saturn exactly this week. I talked a lot about that last week, but this is the week that it's happening, so I hope I prepared you guys well for it. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the horoscope. So as we start off today on Monday, April 29th, the only thing that we've really got going on is the moon's going to be entering Pisces. And, this past week we had the moon go over the South Node and Saturn while it was in Capricorn, and then it went into an Aquarius. And it was a lot of Saturn-ruled energy. That end of last week could have felt very ugh. But as we go into Monday and the moon goes into Pisces, this gives us some room to kind of breathe and to kind of play around with what just happened this past weekend and how exactly we feel about everything. And so as the moon goes into Pisces on Monday, you're going to just be starting your week, doing your thing, but this is just going to be a great time to give yourself some space and to kind of open up to the situation at hand and to really see what, the ups and downs are and what the left and what right is, what's black and what's white. So then as we go into Tuesday, we're going to have the moon conjoin Neptune as well as Saturn station retrograde, and we're going to have Mercury square Saturn in the nodes, while the South Node is exactly on top of Saturn. Tuesday is going to feel very heavy. I'm serious about that. It's going to feel very heavy in a weird way. But what I want to acknowledge is the fact that the moon's going to be in Pisces on top of Neptune. It may feel very dualistic. It may feel very confusing. It may feel very overwhelming. But I think that the moon being in Pisces on Tuesday is also giving us an opportunity to kind of hey, how can we really be open about what's going on here? How can we be very, flow with and not resistant to it? Because as Saturn stations retrograde, I talked a lot about this in my May horoscopes. This is kind of taking on that new sense of responsibility and taking on that, discipline that you need to take on, or facing the challenges and the obstacles and the walls that Saturn has brought to you over the past few months. And this is really interesting because the South Node's on top of Saturn. So where we are facing, these responsibilities, we have to take, we have to be more disciplined. We have to, face this shit basically. The South Node's at this point where it's releasing. It's we're kind of it's time to disconnect from this. It's time to move away and stray away from this. It's time to burn this up. It's time to move the fuck on. And on this day, Mercury is going to be squaring Saturn and squaring the nodes, and I think this is a lot of Mercury energy right here, because as Mercury is in Aries where it wants to be blunt, it wants to be direct, it wants to be clear, while it's squaring Saturn, it's kind of that message is a little rough. But as it's in between the nodes, this is a huge shifting point. This is a huge turning point in hey, what are we trying to stray away from? What isn't working anymore? And where do we need to start going towards? That's kind of that North Node in Cancer. Mercury in between it right here in Aries, while it's squaring Saturn, is God, this is really bad. I keep thinking of this video. If you guys are on Twitter and you know that video of the basketball guy who does the reviews, he's this is bad. This is very, very bad. Saturn stationing retrograde while Mercury's squaring it, it's not going to be the most pleasant sense of communication in the world. But what I really think is going to be important is, what the stuff that is very, very bad, we've got an issue. We've got to do something about it. We just let it sit here and it's done its thing and it's been rotting, and we knew that going into this stuff was going to suck. But it's just time to roll up the sleeves and start going into it. And it's kind of you can be open about that with the moon in Pisces, but you can also, it's going to be easy to detach and disassociate and all of that stuff. My biggest suggestion is this: on Tuesday, the sense of accomplishment and the sense of responsibility you might feel like you want to take on and that you need to take on, take it on, but be very clear about the ultimate goal that it's going to be getting you to, and be very open with the possibilities. Like the moon's in Pisces, it's not going to be super, you're not going to know exactly what to do in that moment, but so give yourself some space and give yourself some time to think and breathe about it. Then, as we go into Wednesday on May 1st, because that's Tuesday, April 30th, on May 1st, we just have the moon going into Aries. And that's really like the only thing that's going on. And I think this is nice because the moon's in Pisces, conjoin Neptune on Tuesday, and it's really, kind of like weird, heavy energy. The moon's going to go into Aries, and this is giving us a lot of energy to be like, okay, I feel clear about where I'm directing my energy. I feel clear about what I'm initiating. I feel clear about what I want to accomplish, and I feel clear about why it is I want to do this. Because as the moon goes into Aries, it's going to conjoin Chiron, later go over Venus, later go over Mercury, and before it goes into Taurus, before the new moon. So this is like, give yourself Tuesday, and then Wednesday you'll feel a lot more clear about what you're deciding and what you're putting yourself into. Then as we get into Thursday, we're going to have Mercury square Pluto and Mercury trine Jupiter. And this is kind of hard to explain. It's kind of like watching an amazing show. Like imagine you're at your favorite band's concert and they're just killing it. But just this one time, something messed up, like the sound engineer messed up, and it was high-pitched screeching noises, and it just like hurt everyone's ears for just like a second. That's kind of like Mercury square Pluto while it's trining Jupiter. It's like, this is awesome, nothing could ruin this. It's like, like sound technical difficulty. That sucked, but hey, this is still going good. Jupiter is retrograde in Sagittarius. This is like, kind of like, what do we feel about all of this stuff? What do I believe? What is my vision? Mercury in Aries is like, I think I know what I want. I think I know how I want to pursue this. I think I'm starting to see when and why and where I should initiate. And as Mercury trines Jupiter, this is in alignment with that vision. But as it squares Pluto, it's just kind of like this. I like using Pluto as like this deeper sense of like, it's just, it feels a lot more scarier than it can be at times. So then as we move into Friday, May 3rd, we're going to have the moon enter Taurus and conjoin Uranus, which this is kind of going to be a little weird, only because as the moon goes into Taurus, and the moon, this is its exalted sign where it can feel a lot more stable and grounded, and there's value there. It's going to conjoin Uranus where it's kind of like, yep, this is different, this is new. We're going to still have the sense of, groundedness and stability and security that sign of Taurus brings. And especially since we're coming up to a new moon and we have both the luminaries in the same sign, this is kind of focused on those Taurus archetypes. And so as these are both getting lit up, and this is a time of kind of like bringing peace to that and connecting these things together, as the moon starts to conjoin Uranus and then later on go into the new moon, this is going to be kind of like electrifying. Like again, we're finding stability and security in these new and, adventurous ways. We're getting out of our minds. We're doing something different. That's like Uranus and Taurus. And as the moon conjoins, this is kind of like that feeling of I'm having security and stability in a new sense that I didn't know I had, or I didn't know was coming to me, or that I didn't even expect in the first place. But then as we move into Saturday on May 4th, that's when we have the new moon in Taurus, and it is going to be trining Saturn. And this is, I really think, constructive because as Saturn's, now retrograde in Capricorn, where we got to handle all of this shit that Saturn's been giving us. This new moon in Taurus is like, all right, like it's kind of like waking up on a Saturday morning in the spring and you're going to do yard work. Like, yep. We're waking up, we're going to do all this stuff, and it's going to look great afterwards, and we're going to tackle it, we're going to handle it. This is constructive, I'm feeling secure, I'm feeling stable. And for this new moon in Taurus, whatever house this is in, or whatever house that occupies for your chart, really look at that and go, what am I revolutionizing here, and where do I need to reset intentions? Where do I need to be clear about these intentions? And as it trines Saturn, this is kind of like, this is commitments and change for the long haul. Saturn's about commitments. Saturn is Chronos. It literally means time. Like this is a long time type deal. And you have that kind of, Saturn's helping you out here. Saturn's giving you a helping hand of like, if you want to reset these intentions on this new moon in Taurus, conjoin Uranus basically, Saturn's basically lending you a hand going, this can be constructive for a long-term thing if you so want it to be. But then as we get into Sunday on May 5th, this is when we're going to have Mars oppose Jupiter, which I really think is going to be pretty interesting because as Mars is in Gemini and it's kind of like, we're doing this and this is going on, everything's kind of like very mentally stimulated right now. It's kind of like, we have multiple options and it's just kind of like shuffling our cards until we feel like we're ready to split the deck. Now, as Mars opposed Jupiter, where Jupiter's like, I've got this vision that I'm trying to expand to, what actions do I need to take and what do I have available to me? This is kind of like when Jupiter gets a real, not like a dose of reality like Saturn, like, yeah, the world's cold and it sucks. Like Mars in Gemini opposing Jupiter in Sagittarius is like, what is the vision that you have versus what are you kind of doing right now? Like Mars is in Gemini, this is about, our words. This is about, matching up our mind with how we act. And it's kind of like, well, if this is the vision that you want, what action steps are you taking to do that? Because if you're not doing that, here's some good feedback for you. If you're not taking the action steps to get that vision, it ain't gonna happen. There's the law of attraction and then there's the law of Goya. The law of Goya is get off your ass and do it. Now, that's basically on Sunday, and I think this is just going to come down to, which path do we want to take? Is this the time to really go, hey, these are my options laid out before me. This is what I've got going on. This is what I am going to initiate. This is what I am going to take on that is going to match, that is going to benefit me, that is going to help me grow into that vision that I'm creating, into that space that I want to create for myself. I really do think that's just what Sunday's basically going to be about, is kind of like, which road do we take, and now's the time to choose. But then as we get into Monday on May 6th, that's when we're going to have the moon go into Gemini and we're going to have Mercury go into Taurus. So as the moon goes into Gemini, and this is kind of like, I always say with the moon in Gemini, it's like there's going to be a lot of information. Things are just kind of going around crazy. As the moon goes into Gemini, this is about being a little bit more open to the possibilities. And it's like, we just had this new moon in Taurus. We're grounded. We're ready to go. Now we can reach out and communicate. Now we can, learn something new, or just kind of just reach out. I like that word for Gemini. It's like, just reach out, get into what's around you, what's in your sphere, learn something new, talk to someone. And then as Mercury goes into Taurus, where Mercury had a lot of pressure in Aries. There was a lot of grinding on Mercury there. And as Mercury goes into Taurus, where it is a little bit more stable, it is going to conjoin Uranus, though, in just a little bit. That'll be happening next week. But as Mercury goes into Taurus, this is, I think, again, Mercury's the messenger, the communicator. This is like, okay, what do we need to solidify ourselves in and find a little bit more security and stability in when it comes to our communication and our mindsets? However, I think this is also about, how are we communicating value? How are we expressing value? How are we thinking about value? And what are we finding valuable? Mercury is, it's the planet of astrology, because astrology is divination by measuring. And Mercury is about measuring, making lists, writing notes, stuff like that. This is kind of like, what do I find valuable? What do I find security and stability in? And as Mercury comes up to Uranus in just a little bit as we go into next week, this is kind of like, yep, it's time to change this. It's time to get rid of the old and do something new with it. So that basically leads me into next week. Next week we got Venus squaring Saturn in the nodes. And then we... Oh my gosh, we'll get through it. It's just going to be for like a day. We'll survive. But then we'll also have Mercury conjoin Uranus, and we'll have Venus trine Jupiter, which is like, thank God we have Venus trine Jupiter after she squares Saturn. That's like, that's at least something. And then we also have the Sun trine Saturn, and that's what next week's looking like. It's kind of like, this week we have this new moon. It's kind of like, shit, we got to face all these challenges. We got to take on all this shit. We got to kind of just get ready for it and be like, yep, this is for the long haul, and we got to get ready for it. Next week, it's a little bit more of the same thing, but just a lot less pressurized, in my opinion. And so with that being said, that's what I got for you guys. Thank you guys so much for being here and liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you, and I'll be seeing you next week.